Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. I'm Reuven Ben Shalom, sitting in for Jonathan Hessen. We're counting 654 days since the surprise, brutal attack by Hamas on southern villages and towns in Israel. And since then, Israel has went to a seven-front war that has changed and morphed, going through various scales, various dimensions, all the way to Iran and back, with Gaza now again the main arena. And as we sit here now, 654 days after the beginning of the war, we still have 50 hostages, Israelis held in brutal conditions in the tunnels in Gaza Strip by Hamas, the terror organization, 20 of them alive, the other 30 dead. And to elaborate on the situation of the war now and where we stand in the main arena and others, I'm joined starting from top to right, all via Zoom. I'm alone in the studio by Dr. Brigadier General Reserve Amnon Sofrin, former head of the Intelligence Directorate at Mossad and former commander of IDF Combat Intelligence Corps. Shalom, Amnon, welcome. Top left, the civilian, which means you outrank everyone here, Mr. Hazem Al-Rabra, former senior advisor for public affairs at the Department of State, and currently senior fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Welcome, Hazem. And last but not least, Brigadier General in the Reserves, Yossi Kupperwasser, who heads the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, former Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. So welcome to all of you. We have a lot to cover, and I'm thinking if we should start maybe with the attacks of the day in Yemen, but perhaps we'll get there in a few minutes. And let's talk first about the situation in the Gaza Strip and where we stand currently with the hostage negotiation, with operational considerations on the ground. Starting from you, Brigadier General Sofrin, what can you tell us about the situation in Gaza today?
First of all, the IDF is going on with its military pressure on Hamas positions, especially on the northern part of Gaza Strip, the area of Bet Hanun, which was, we had a lot of terrorists there, and they carried out a lot of activities and caused a lot of soldiers that were killed and wounded. On the other hand, we're still operating in the area of Khan Yunis to clear the area, which is a huge area. It's a rural area combined with urban city, and it's a lot of activity to clear it all, and especially all the underground tunnels that are a lot of them beneath this country, beneath this city. Regarding negotiations that are going on in Doha, in Qatar, that are carried out what we call indirect speech, or indirect talks. It seems that we're approaching to some equation that will be acceptable for all of us on both sides. Of course, with the American pressure on one hand, on the other hand, the pressure applied by Qatar and by Egypt on Hamas to get to some agreement that will enable, first of all, to release at least 10 living hostages that are being abducted and held in Hamas tunnels beneath Gaza Strip. And part of the people that were killed and dead during this abduction to Gaza, that part of them will be brought back, and in return, it's going to be a ceasefire of 60 days. And within these 60 days, there are going to be negotiations to end up this war and to get to some agreed solution that will enable, in the end, first of all, that Hamas will not rule Gaza Strip, but somebody else will be there. And we don't know still who this somebody else is, because we didn't define what kind of entity will control Gaza and what will be the role of Hamas. And of course, we speak about the deportation of some of the leaders of Hamas out of this country and out of this area totally, and to disarm Hamas to some extent. And I'm not sure that this is viable right now, but let's first of all agree that We're approaching this kind of equation that will enable, in the end, to get to this agreement for the ceasefire right now and to stop the war. And to apply more pressure on Hamas, the IDF now signaling that it is beginning to attack what we call the central area of Gaza Strip that was never actually been attacked before brutally. The area of Deir al-Balach and all the village and all the refugee camps, what we call the central refugee camps, because we know that part of the people that were abducted are being kept there. And so we carried out very, very carefully activities in these areas.
Mr. Al-Ghabra, I'm very curious from your perspective about the various aspects that Amnon just addressed. First, from there, does it seem that it's winding down? Does it seem that this ceasefire will be brokered? And what's your view on what the day after brings as far as the place of Hamas? Because for many Israelis, after October 7th, there is no place for Hamas, whatever we do. How do you see this?
Absolutely. The United States continues its diplomatic efforts right now. And the good news is there still is zero daylight between Israel and the United States when it comes to Hamas policy. There is no future for that terrorist organization in Gaza or anywhere else for that matter. That is still the American conviction that is not likely to change for any reason. The US is not going to come back and say, well, maybe we should let the terrorist organization go back and rule the Gaza Strip. However, Hamas knows this. This is why every negotiation is a difficult negotiation, and Hamas plays the ruse every time we get to the negotiation table. We get close to a deal. We believe a deal is signed, and Hamas comes back and comes up with a tiny issue that derails the whole document. Hamas understands it's an existential issue for them, and also understand that due to the complexities of the international media stance, the political and public pressure on Israel. Unfortunately, the more delays there are, the more Hamas feels to be in a better position. They highlight humanitarian issues, and for some reason that I still fail to understand, always Israel is blamed in the media and by the public. We rarely see the message that, hey, Hamas is the direct reason behind this humanitarian crisis we're seeing today, and their insistence on aborting any negotiation on the 11th hour is what's causing the humanitarian crisis right now, while everybody else is ready to sign a deal and move forward and get aid into Gaza. It's a complex situation. Hamas continues to play on sentiments. Unfortunately, while the United States has played an objective middleman here in negotiations, the other parties that we always expected to put pressure on Hamas have failed in putting the sufficient pressure to move the ball forward. And that continues to be the case almost 2 years in right now. We need something to change here if we are to reach a deal, but also we understand that there may not be a deal. And in that case, the only option will be continued military pressure by Israel because there are no other options. So the good news, there's, as I said, zero daylight between Israel and the United States on the objective. We're trying our own tools to reach that objective. That seems to be more and more difficult to reach. However, we have to reiterate the point that the main goal right now for everybody is safe return for the remaining hostages and the bodies of the deceased. Then there will be a lot of runway to resolving the Gaza issue once and for all.
Your answers so far are opening so many new avenues of discussion. We probably won't be able to cover them all. But General Kupavasser, I want to ask you about what General Sofrin mentioned, and that is that we gave notifications to the population of some areas of the central camps to clear away, areas that the IDF so far has not acted at all. What does this mean as far as what the IDF is doing now, the operational objectives? What does this mean as far as what Israel is trying to do in pushing forward with a ceasefire?
Well, we are facing three options in Gaza. And the option we choose is the one that allows us not to choose. And this is to postpone the decision as fast as we can, moving towards this interim deal with Hamas that would allow the release of 10 hostages. And even for that, we need to have the acquiescence of Hamas. And as Hazem said, it's not easy to get it. We have to put more pressure on Hamas in order to convince them to move towards this limited goal of releasing half of the living hostages. The way we do it is a combination of different pressures. We put a lot of military pressure on them in the last couple of days. The number of high-ranking operatives of Hamas that lost their lives due to Israeli attacks was growing significantly, including some of them that were involved in producing weapons that were supposed to be used in the future. And it's definitely a heavy cost for Hamas. At the same time, we keep moving to new areas that we haven't operated in yet, including, as Amnon said, the center areas of Deir al-Balach, and that's the camps that surround it. And this is done carefully in the sense that we are all aware of the fact that the sound hostages might be kept in this area. So I'm sure that this move is being done in coordination with the directorate that is responsible for the fate of the hostages. But still, we haven't operated in these areas before. This is a message to Hamas that, look, if you don't move forward, there's a price to pay. And the third issue that we do is keeping the effort to separate Hamas from the population, both by supporting those groups that are ready to replace Hamas already at this early stage, like the Yasser Abu Shabab group, and by making it more difficult for Hamas to be in charge of the supply of food and humanitarian aid through the use of the American company GHF that is now involved in disseminating the food. So all three efforts are helping each other. And I think that this creates within Hamas the feeling that maybe we should do something. The reason they don't do anything is that what is at stake is an existential issue for Hamas. Hamas fears that if it gives its acquiescence to a deal that doesn't guarantee the end of the war without Hamas being disarmed, it's going to eventually lead to this result. And of course, they cannot afford losing the war, because losing the war means that 7th of October was a wrong move. It's something that Hamas cannot admit. And that's something very complicated for Hamas as we get to the final decisions about the fate of Gaza in the future. Mm-hmm. The other two options that Israel has are either to not wait anymore for Hamas and to take over the rest of the Gaza Strip and remove Hamas from power with power, and or the showing readiness to accept Hamas conditions and just in order to release the hostages. There's a school of thought inside Israel that thinks that this is the right thing to do. I'm not part of that, but I can understand the logic that stands behind that. And Israel, in order not to decide between the two decisive decisions that it may take, prefers to postpone the decision and try to put more pressure on Hamas to accept the route that would enable us to keep hesitating between the two extremes.
Absolutely. General Sofrin, let's address the problematic issue of the humanitarian centers and all the debate around what's happening there. And this is a problematic issue. I can say that it's problematic for me because we have almost daily reports coming out of there. In a way, a lot of it doesn't make sense because we're trying to supply aid. We're trying to do anything we can to protect these centers, make it happen. Yet every day there are reports of people being killed, inflated numbers certainly by Hamas, but something's going on there. Can you talk a bit about the complexity there, the operational complexity, and maybe the PR complexity?
The basic idea was to separate Hamas for the people. That means that not Hamas will be responsible for delivering humanitarian aid and food and everything else to the population, to the residents in Gaza, but somebody else. And this will, what we call, weaken Hamas control upon the Gaza Strip. Now, the idea is, of course, is a very good idea, and the fact is that the implementation is different because, first of all, nobody checks who comes in and what does it take. And maybe some activists of Hamas come in and take supply as if for the families, but nevertheless, nobody really controls who gets in and who gets out. That's first. Second, there are only few stations in Gaza Strip, not enough for the whole population, and we are forced to allow convoys to get in from the northern part of Gaza Strip, and these are being taken care immediately by Hamas, and that means Hamas is still controlling part of the humanitarian aid that gets in, and not only by the what we call international entity that is maintaining these activities. Now, when people are rushing and trying to get all of them together, somebody is shooting, and I'm not sure that this is the IDF. I can't prove, of course, that this is Hamas trying to deny people from getting to take humanitarian aid and food from these centers. And I believe that this is the real issue and not IDF shooting without noticing. If IDF is carrying out some shooting in the air, is only to deter people not to gather too much because it endangers the people that are protecting or securing these centers, which is the IDF soldiers. And therefore, there is a clash, and there is, of course, there is a friction between those two entities. And I believe that Hamas is trying to take advantage of that. And its activists are shooting at the crowd. And to blame Israel, that Israel is shooting, and Israel, of course, is executing people because they're trying to get humanitarian aid. And I believe this is the complexity. It doesn't work very well. It is maybe should be organized better. But it's the first step, and we have to look and wait for something better to be in the next phase when it comes.
Ms. Al-Ghabra, how do you see this from your perspective? You know, Israel has been facilitating the introduction of huge amounts of humanitarian aid throughout the war. The other side, of course, will push the narrative of starvation. There certainly we never reached the levels that were voiced by the UN, certainly not voiced by the terror organization Hamas. Yet I'm sure the situation is not perfect on the ground. It's a war zone. How is the humanitarian issue perceived in the United States, also as far as Israel's obligations and what we're doing with it on the ground?
The humanitarian issue is of great concern to the United States for various reasons. Unfortunately, we need to focus on the PR aspect of your question because everybody's losing the PR war except Hamas right now. It's very unfortunate, but Hamas continues to enjoy a supportive population. We can delve into why is that, and we could take hours talking about it. But unfortunately, that is the nature of the conflict. We need to reiterate the facts, which is important, even when the other side seems to be doing a great job selling lies. And we're starting to see a lot of AI-generated videos of mass starvations. But at the same time, when you actually look at, we've been monitoring really what's happening in the food sector specifically, and we see restaurants being open and having full and expansive menus. So it's hard to understand what's happening when on one we're geolocating a video coming from one area, showing mass starvation. But 3 blocks away, there is this massive restaurant called I think, Thailandia restaurant. Uh, it's hard to get facts from a war zone, especially a war zone where the population or the civilian population is continuously controlled by the enemy. It's a very hard task. However, we have been doing in the United States our very best to get food in, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on this operation to provide basic necessities to the Gazans. We are cooperating with the Israeli side that has been very cooperative so far in a very, very difficult operational environment to get aid to their intended recipients, despite the risk of attacks, despite a lot of the aid being stolen by Hamas or other militias that have sprouted in the past couple of years. But we need to realize it's a difficult situation. It's a difficult PR environment that should not discourage the noble goal of delivering aid to the civilian population. Yet at the same time, we need to always highlight what Hamas is doing and the mistakes being made by the local population that are hurting themselves by continuing to support a terrorist organization that have caused every woe we've seen in the past 600 and some days in Gaza. We're looking at videos of Gaza and the food security in Gaza before October 7th. Gaza was a great place to live. Compared to other countries in the Middle East, compared to Lebanon, compared to Syria, you'd see a lot more food security over there. Now, after the attacks of October 7th, look what happened. Hamas brought war on the local population, and the population needs to understand that war will end when Hamas goes, and everything will eventually go back to normal and even better, potentially.
Thank you. General Kupavasser, we have a few minutes left. What should Israel, and if yes, what should we do to bridge this gap with a battle of narratives and bringing the truth faster to the world before all of these condemnations?
Well, it's not easy. We are fighting here a machine that is very well oiled and functioning very well, building this narrative against Israel around the globe. Many elements participating in this effort. We see the mainstream media taking the announcements of the Hamas health ministry as if this is the truth, and so on. There's a clear tendency to blame Israel. It's not something new, but it's working, and we are facing a very strong opposition to Israel throughout the world. Fortunately, I must say that there are some very good spokespersons for Israel that managed to fight back. And most of the leaders in the free world understand that the picture that is portrayed by the Hamas sources and by those who are fed by Hamas sources is not necessarily the true picture. But we have to bring into the game new sources that will be reliable and will be acceptable. And one of the things we didn't do until now, and I don't know if we can do it in a supervised manner, is to allow more journalists into Gaza Strip, journalists that we can trust that will report the truth about what's happening there. We haven't done it because of security concerns, but this is playing back against us because people say, well, okay, the only source we have about what's going on in Gaza is the Hamas affiliated sources. So what can we do? We take you cannot come with a different opinion. And on top of that, some of the pictures are really problematic. When you see the crowd rushes to a truck fully loaded with food, and everybody's tearing a piece of it and behaving as if it's a total mob because they are hungry, or at least that's probably the reason why they do that. You cannot stand nearby and say, "No, this is nothing."
Yes.
It's something. And, it makes things more complicated for Israel to explain. I think we have to repeat what Hazem said, that this is all the result of what Hamas did. On 6th of October, nothing of that was the situation. The situation was way, way, way better. And even today, there are still restaurants and there are still places where they have plenty. And it's not everybody is suffering. And we have to realize that those who suffer because Hamas wants them to suffer. Israel is making its best in order to make sure that everybody gets the supplies they need. And, I speak a lot in the international media, and I'm asked this question, and I said, look, this makes no sense. It makes no sense that Israel would shoot at the people waiting in line to get the food that Israel is trying to make available to them. It's the claim that Israel shoots at them is really illogical. And that's why we have to wait until all these cases are being solely looked upon. And we have answers. One of the things we have to do is to expedite the time and the way we give answers to open questions, because it takes 1 second before everybody blames Israel for something bad that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time the explanation comes that it wasn't Israel, it wasn't this place, it wasn't this, it wasn't that, no,
Yes.
there were not that many casualties or at all. Before that information comes, everybody already has taken this as the truth. And
Right.
it's very difficult to remedy the problem that was already created. So it's we have to be much more effective and fast in responding to these allegations. And I think we can do better. It's not that it's something that is beyond our capabilities. We can do better,
Absolutely.
and we should do better.
Thank you very much. I had questions about Syria and about Yemen, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have. I would like to thank General Sofrin, General Kuperwasser, Mr. Al-Rabra. I would also like to thank our viewers. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you next time. Shalom from Jerusalem.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.